Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the session on talking about the next generation of Maroons. I'm Sarah McGill, Executive Director in the Admissions Office and Director of the Alumni Schools Committee here at the University of Chicago.
And I'm Chris McGill. I'm an Assistant Director of Admissions, also working in the Admissions Office as well as with the Alumni Schools Committee. And as recruiters as well, I do recruit for our Admissions Office for the states of Alabama, South Carolina, and Florida.
So the last registration sheet that I saw, we had about 40 individuals registered. So I guess we'll see if anyone trickles in, but I do want to start. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming. I understand that President Zimmer spoke a lot about admissions yesterday. So we had planned to talk a little bit about just the admissions trends here at the university, as well as the Alumni Schools Committee, which is the group. I'll wait for a few moments for everyone to get settled. So we had planned to talk a little bit about the admission statistics, the trends here at the university, as well as what opportunities are available for alumni who want to support the undergraduate admissions efforts. We do have a lot of ASC members in the audience, so this is informal, intended to be to inform and discuss. So I would encourage anybody affiliated with the ASC, if you have any comments or would like to add anything, please feel free. Along the same lines, this is informal, so if you have any questions as we're talking, please don't hesitate to ask. Christy and I are here to answer and give any information out. So if we want to talk a little bit about just what's been going on in undergraduate admissions at the university. I'm sure you've all heard that there's been a great increase in the amount and the interest of the university, and that we can see most tangibly in the amount of applications we receive for undergraduate admissions. Last year we received approximately 22,000 applications, which over the course of 3 years is a significant growth. We were looking in 2009, we were at roughly 13,000. So there's been a great interest in the university. Chris can talk more of it, but the word on the street is that UChicago is the hot school for universities.
Yes, usually every visit, students, the counselors would mention that the students were particularly interested, which was a little bit different from the past trends.
So we in admissions work to attract and yield the top scholars from around the world who are a good fit and match for the university. So we really try to talk to students about what UChicago has to offer, what makes us unique. What's the value of an education here compared to maybe what they would get at a Harvard or a Yale? We don't want students who this isn't a good fit for, who they're not going to be successful. So although we're very excited about our numbers and people that are interested in us, we're not looking at just increasing our ranks, right? We're looking at getting students, talking to students about what makes us unique and what they'll get here, and really talking to those students about coming here. Mm-hmm. So with the increase in applications and the interest in the university, our class size has stayed relatively consistent. There's been a small increase, but we're still admitting about 1,390 students. So the great news is that our selectivity, our admit rate, is at kind of an all-time. It's at an all-time low, which is actually in the industry an all-time high. We're admitting about 16%, which puts us in the neighborhood, the range of some of our peer institutions when you look at institutions like Harvard or Yale. So we're really able to be selective about the types of students and ensure that we maintain the same types of quality and standards that really embody this institution. And then the fascinating thing about admissions is in the front end, right, we really want to talk to students and see interest. But then when we send out decisions, kind of the balance of power shifts. So we go from talking to students about what a great school they are and encouraging them to come to us, When we extend an offer of admissions, the student holds the power. So now we really want to see that the students that we admitted, so those students that are really the top of the class that we want to see here, we try to yield them and try to get them to come here. And pleased to say that last year our yield rate was 40%, which was high for the institution. We had been trending somewhere in the mid to upper 30s for about 10 years.
We have a question.
Quick question. Well, what's the sort of peer average for yield? I mean, is 40% good, or is it?
40% gets us into the band. The University of Chicago doesn't have any type of binding early decision.
Right.
So when you look a lot at our peer institutions, they have a binding early program. So that really helps the yield. So if you look at, I hate to keep going back to them, but I think they're a little bit better known. If you look at the Harvards and the Yales, they're more at the 60 to 70% range.
But that's including their binding.
That's including the binding.
What's the yield for Chicago's early decision? Is it really low relative to the regular admissions?
Early action, the acceptance rate and the yield is typically, it could hover just a little bit above it, but there's no quota. We're not you know, favoring these students typically, but you know, these students are usually do show a little bit more promise. They're applying earlier. They of course have a little bit more interest. Some institutions require students to only apply to their school. It's called single choice early action. So we're not seeing those students who have interest in other schools over us. And so those yields will generally be a little bit higher, but we don't really memorize those numbers for obvious reasons.
Probably put it somewhere in the mid-40s. They tend to track a little bit higher. Where we're at a disadvantage is they have the same, whether you're accepted early or regular, you do have until May 1st to accept. Mm-hmm. So our decisions usually go out for early mid-December. So that's a long time, right? We have from mid-December until May 1 to reinforce that this is the right institution for those students.
Go ahead.
In terms of the legacies, what's our percentage of interest and percentage of acceptance relative to our peers, and do we have specific programs for that? Because I don't think it's very well.
So not surprising, I think the interest in our legacy students, we've really seen an increase in students that have legacy connections. That is something that I think the institution takes great pride in, right? Because I think it's a great endorsement when parents when parents see their children that want to attend. As far as special programming, we don't do anything special. We certainly are aware of legacy students, but we want to make sure that it's a level playing field, if you will.
How would you rank the factors that had impacted the increase in applications? Is it legacy students? Is it, I understood there's a common application now for schools that makes it easier for people to apply. I mean, not just what factors, but how would you rank, you know, the factors that increase the apps? Or maybe there's a university had a program that focused on it.
I think it's multiple. I don't think you can attribute it to any one piece. It is standard in the industry when you do switch to the combination. You see a small thing. I would say that the university's methodology has really just changed, and not just related to undergraduate admissions, but when you look at the university in general, with everything, I think we tend to just be a little bit more vocal about what the institution has to offer, right? So if we talk a little bit more about the accomplishments of our faculty, we talk a little bit more about what's going on campus, we talk more about the value of undergraduate education here. And I think for undergraduate admissions, so what I can speak to is our office has put a little bit more emphasis on going out and talking to schools and regions where maybe we would be a little bit less known, to talk to students who wouldn't have access to us, to tell them what they would get here. So I think we're just a little bit more vocal about who we are.
And as a well-connected alumni, I'm sure you know that the University of Chicago has made recent changes, additions to the university and the college itself, which is really increasing the opportunities on campus. I think one of the main points of, really the strong points of the admissions office is we're not changing the student who's coming in, but we're at least doing a better job of advertising the opportunities that students have on our campus, which is definitely making a a more friendlier approach to how we're reaching out to the students, and we'll talk about it in a little bit. That's how also we're really addressing alumni and volunteers with these committees to address these students as well.
And just to build on that, when President Zimmer, he spoke extensively on this topic yesterday at the reception. Someone had asked exactly the same, very similar question to the one you just asked. And the way he phrased it was, historically the way we viewed admissions from an undergraduate perspective was we expected students who were good enough to be here to know already at the age of 17 that this is an outstanding institution. Now the shift has been a little different. We're not assuming a 17-year-old will know that this is a quality education. We've taken the view that perhaps we need to inform people at the age of 17 and their parents that this is an institution that is comparable to some of the great institutions in the country, and that has had a profound impact, that outward attempt to let people know, including the people in this room, frankly, which is one of the reasons why we're in this room, is to increase the alumni's efforts to not be silent about the virtues of this education, that somehow we as ambassadors need to help that cause, to make it less a metaphysical revelation that, oh, this is a good school, and more of, wow, someone told me that was a good school.
Right, I heard the speech as well, and what I was trying to get at is drilling down, and if they're actually tracking factors. I mean, you said we've gotten out a little bit more. I mean, is there a program? Are there concerted efforts to reach other schools? How would you, is it just, more talking or more alumni? Has there been an actual effort to track and to increase the number of applications with certain metrics?
I think the broad-based answer to all of those points is yes. So our outreach in general has increased. We are looking at different schools that we can, that we should be going to, talking to. We're not just limiting it to students that select us. So we're being very selective in the markets that we travel to. We have done extensive work on our publications and how we talk about us, so that it's I think attractive to students today. We talk about our athletics program, right? We talk about the study abroad program. We work with guidance counselors. We work with career professionals. So we are trying to get at different pieces of the market. So it's not just let's cast the wide net and see what sticks.
Do you use social media?
Yes.
Yes.
As you can see also with those bookmarks that Corin passed out, we widely use those as well.
Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr. Frankly, I don't know.
We go to a lot of college fairs. Typically, frankly, the students have learned more about the college than I can communicate to them, even as an ambassador for the university, because they've learned so much through the social media, the websites for all the college students. Really, the person who I have the most impact on can be the parents, frankly, because the parents don't follow social media, and usually they're paying for it. And usually they have a huge impact on the decision, frankly. So those are people who actually, as an ambassador, you can speak to and tell them something they don't already know. The kids know everything already, more than I know, frankly, about what's going on at university.
Just to connect to that point, though, it becomes a little bit self-fulfilling in the sense that, what I've seen now is that because students who are coming off campus and are young are really excited and enjoy their time, that's coming down into the high schools. And so when I graduated, I think most of the people that tell their friends at the high school, would say, Chicago is really hard, I hated my experience, don't apply. Like, I don't think people applied for at least 5 years after I graduated from my high school. And now people are saying, wow, they loved it, they're having a good time, they get to see other students that are active and having fun. So I think as that continues and as we push out more alumni who are excited and eager and helping out, it gets back into the school.
Yeah, and he alluded to, President Zimmer alluded to that too, because he said there were first fundamental changes made in the student experience, frankly, which Dean Boyer tried to implement. That's what he was referring to when he said that.
Yeah, so what would you say are the top metrics that you use to define success in an admissions year? Is that the same across other institutions? And then, like, what's next? Like, if we're looking at the same data and still measuring ourselves with the same sort of benchmarks now and continuing to do that, like, that seems like it'd be kind of stale in a way. So it's like, how do we innovate from what we're doing now? And what are we doing now in terms of measuring success?
So I think that there are I wouldn't say small. I think we crossed the first hurdle, if you will, which is I think we are attracting a larger group of students, right? So our selectivity, which was a big benchmark. We were at 44% in 2001. So that means 44% of the students who applied were accepted. We're down to 16% now. So I think that establishes, you know, that's a check mark, if you will. I think we're also trying to increase the areas that we draw from. So traditionally, right, Illinois was one of our largest states. It still is, but we're seeing a larger group of applicants from the coasts now. California was our second largest. We've seen a great increase in the East Coast, which in the higher ed world, that's a big deal, right? Because the East Coast has a lot of great schools. So the fact that students are considering here, that's a win for us. I think down the road, we're going to look a little bit more at the head-to-head comparisons of our peer institutions. So students that apply here versus a Harvard or a Yale, how many are choosing us? Where are we winning?
And I think on to that, I mean, admissions will serve itself in a way, but it's of course also serving the college. And over time, what we're doing is we're finding students who are going to be perfect for this institution, but also perfect for the resources we have on our campus, and perfect for the professors who are some of the best scholars and academics in the world. And really, we're trying to meet these two needs.
I'm addressing this to your question. I've been a member of the Alumni Schools Committee now for about 30-some years. I'm sorry, I've been with the Alumni Schools Committee for 30-some years. I've followed college admissions pretty closely. The summer of last year, I came and I met Jim Mondorf. And one of my questions to him, this is after there's been a 40% jump in applications. And I thought, my God, you know, the place is on steroids. I said, how are we doing? And he said, we're getting more of the kids at the top end, which is very good. And I said, how do we do in our own backyard? How do we do with places like New Trier, the magnet schools in the city of Chicago? Are we getting their top aces? And he said, no, we're not. And I said, are we getting, the top of the line? Are we getting the presidential scholars? Are we getting Intel finalists? People like that. And he said, no, we're not. This is just me. This is not the gospel according to the admissions committee. But those are the people who, for years and years, have been going to HYPNS and the two technical institutes. And as I see it, you ask, what's the next step? That's where we want to go. I talked to Jim Mondorf by phone a couple of months ago, and I said, how are we doing? I guess I have sort of special dispensation to call him. And with respect to the current class, he said the number of people who are rated as, academic ones, he still use that one too, I don't know if you guys know that term, which are the top of the line academic potential, is up by 40% this year, which is a huge jump. I mean, when I started doing this, we were lucky to get 4,000 applications for 900 openings. I mean, it's just a different college, but there's still a way to go. I don't know if that adds to you. Sorry.
Oh no, that was good.
I think he's going.
Okay.
What strategies do you have to increase the yield?
Oh, that's a great question. So this is, I think, where the ASC comes in, right? Because when we're looking at yielding students, then it's really about how to reinforce that this is the right school. So we've done. I think we're increasing the outreach at that end of the cycle. So there are more efforts to call admitted students. We stay in regular contact with them through our social media. We start a Facebook page that are admitted students for that cycle, right? The class of 2016. That one is just going to be kicking off. So we stay connected that way. Each year we send out a scarf mailing to our students that are admitted early action. It's just a UChicago scarf, but we don't release the date. So there's all these, there's all this buzz about when the scarves are coming out. There's little things. We also then work to engage our campus partners to talk about how we can target students that maybe don't have the resources to come to school and how we can do things in the neighborhood. So really, members of the ASC, our Alumni Schools Committee, are really extensions of the admissions office, and they give prospective students a chance to meet with and talk with admissions experts, if you will, in their own backyard. So last year we started admitted student receptions, where we had alumni hosts that opened up their homes or sponsored an event where students in that region came to them. It was great. They had a chance to meet other students that were admitted, form a sense of community. We had ASC members talk at the event, so they were able to share a little bit about their personal experiences, answer questions, share stories. So we're just trying to make ourselves more accessible. In the back.
I don't know if this is your intention, it's kind of gone to open question time, and taking this back a little bit.
If you all sign up for the Alumni Schools Committee, I'm okay with it. I will take as many questions as long as everybody volunteers and can meet with and talk with prospective students.
Perfect. So I think there's an underlying fear that I've heard expressed before, and that I think maybe others in this room feel, is that although the increase in breadth is a fantastic thing, especially when you're able to get people who have accolades that we haven't been able to reach before, there is a fear that the student is changing despite your adamance that they're not. And I think the way I think about this is I look towards friends that I know who graduated a few years ago who were, for instance, on the wait list, and then came in and won some of the university's most prestigious awards, graduated to go to some of the best jobs, and are active members of the alumni community today. And I fear that those people wouldn't get in today and the university would be lacking for them. Do you have any tactical things you're doing, not just to increase the breadth, but to evaluate the depth of each student to make sure that they're matching the profile across all generations of the University of Chicago?
The University of Chicago admissions process has always been sort of a deep admissions process in itself. We're not this school, and with our increased outreach efforts, we're not the school that says you need to self-select yourself into the University of Chicago. We're definitely, it's become a little bit more of a popular place. However, our application has always been a little bit more lengthy compared to others, and we have those essays that reach out to them. Our outreach itself, students and parents will always come up to us and say, I love the outreach, it speaks, it's different compared to other schools, how they message those. So, students, when they're writing to our essays, they have a choice not to. They can easily fill out the common application for other schools who are going to be just as highly selective, and, we want to compare ourselves to. So.
Great tactical example, SATs now have a writing portion to it, right? We don't recognize that. We believe that the value of our essays, choosing to write to our prompts, and what we can glean from the quality of their work speaks to what we want to see in a UChicago student. Bill touched briefly on the academic ranking. We have a FIT ranking. UChicago is known for intellect and academic rigor. As we read a student's application, as we look at a letter of recommendation, as we look at the level of involvement, whether they are an individual that is strictly a soccer player and does everything with soccer, or is just a very involved, active student, we look at those characteristics. So we're not just looking, we're not just taking the top 10% that admit. There are some characteristics that are distinctly UChicago that have to be maintained, and that will be maintained.
Because when they come here, they still have to take the core, they still have to have discussions, they still take an interdisciplinary approach to their education.
We can't admit students that won't be successful, because that'll hurt us on the back end, right? I think one of the things that Dean Boyer takes great pride in is our retention rate hit an all-time high from freshman to sophomore. We're hovering somewhere right around 99%. It's never been that high. So if we were to take students that wouldn't have our values, I don't think that they would be successful here. Sheldon?
Just another thing to use an advertising example here, that there's a thing called reach and frequency, and that in any sort of marketing campaign, you want to increase your reach, you want to reach the largest amount of people. And we have to take ourselves away from the perception that will sort of meddle with or lower the average quality of the students in the pool, because it doesn't. It, in fact, increases more of the people that you want to see. And the other thing I want to note is that, you know, from the time that both of us worked in the admissions office when we were in school here, the staff has at least doubled, if not tripled. So that you're not dealing with people just passing over people who could be great, simply because of the number of applications, that you're not just rushing through the work, that everybody still gets the same sort of analysis and due time. And you know, I've gone back to my high school to talk about the school several times, and I see people interested in it now that never would have been when I went to school. 3 people from my cohort came in 2005, and it's a lot more.
Yeah, hi. Ashwin Durga. I'm the president of the UK Alumni Association. Just to talk to your point of please sign up for the ASC. To be honest, I've hated the ASC for 15 years because I've been on board on alumni boards in Michigan, in Chicago, and in New York for 15 years, and I've been signing up for 15 years, and I've yet to do an interview. Okay? And let me finish.
Yeah.
My problem with the ASC is why they operate so separate from the Alumni Association and why we don't work together. In New York, we tried to get the ASC chair on our board, and they were off somewhere. In London now, I have finally reached out and caught the ASC chair there, and now I have her. So we're going to work together.
You're working with Tanya?
Yes.
Yeah. Your comment is very timely. I met with Laura and Michael yesterday. We're trying to address just what the point that you raised.
Mm-hmm.
There's no good reason that it's separate. Yeah, the ASD has a programmatic base, but there's a connection to a broader group of alumni that we see great benefit in trying to close that gap, if you will.
Well, that doesn't necessarily have to be that they're separate. I mean, where I am, they're not. So.
Exactly. Yeah. If
Well,
you
I
want to
think-
speak to your
think-
point, you're the
yeah.
treasurer on your alumni club, and you're also one of our chairs for Florida. So.
And I think in DC, actually, we've folded them in where they're very much a part of our officer structure. So there's a 20-person contact list, and there's one for DC, Northern Virginia, Maryland.
I think we're trying to make it more uniform. It's hard when you have hundreds of alumni clubs to get everyone to follow an approach. In my club as well, you know, an officer is an ASC.
Exactly, that's always been the vision.
Yeah. That's the vision we're trying to get to, if we can.
In the back.
I want to push a little harder on the sort of the what's next question, because I think that really gets to what Chris is talking about. When we're talking about sort of where we are right now, and the type of people we're able to admit at this point, the type of people we're able to convert from admits into matriculated students, is the goal to get the people who are going to schools on the East Coast and on the West Coast to bring them in, or is the admissions department sort of still see a distinctive UChicago student that we're just not converting for other reasons? I mean, I don't quite get the next step beyond where we are right now.
We want the top scholars from around the world who are a good fit and match for the University of Chicago.
Okay.
So we believe that there are still good students that are a good fit and match for us, that will be successful, that do hold the values that we hold, that we're not getting. So we see areas of opportunity that.
You touched upon something. I've just returned from Singapore to the U.S., and I understand there's a strong link between Singapore and University of Chicago. What of the admissions, what percentage of the students are international, and what aspects of your activities are really directed to getting the top scholars from around the world, the international student from Hong Kong or wherever?
I mean, about 11% of our students are international, and we have a special team in our office who is more skilled at answering the questions or inquiries of international students who email us, who, of course, we do, as Sarah mentioned, calls to admitted students from our current students to congratulate them and sort of talk through them the opportunities at the University of Chicago. It's a little bit more difficult, of course, with international phone calls, but we have a special night where we do make international phone calls to the admitted students. And so we also have some international chairs and ASC regions, and with that they're able to, as you had mentioned, host admitted student receptions, interview students, even go to some of the college fairs.
Does every student who apply have to have an interview?
No.
It's a optional.
It's optional.
Well, we don't, 2 reasons. We do offer on-campus interviews that students can select to, and then we don't have the capacity, should students all request an alumni interview, we don't have the supply to meet that demand.
Is there a perception that if I have an interview, I have a better chance of getting one?
I think there is that perception. I wouldn't necessarily say it was true, but there is the perception.
I believe they're recommended.
I'm sorry?
I believe that interviews are recommended, not mandatory, but.
They're recommended if you can add more to your application than you would not be able to.
I was admitted to the college under Ted O'Neill, and I felt like during my 4 years there, the shift, or if there was a trend, and I might be wrong in this, we have the statistics, I don't, this is just my empirical observation, was a shift toward, in terms of socioeconomic demographics, towards more private school, more wealthy suburban students. And if you look at correlation between educational attainment and socioeconomic background in this country in general for secondary school, I mean, the correlation is there. And so in thinking in terms of our peer groups and fighting for these students who are at the top, yes, some of them might be in magnet schools, some of them might be elsewhere. How do we stack up? I mean, I know we have Odyssey scholarships and things like this, but how are we doing in terms of attracting youth from every quarter, but also the most gifted youth from every quarter socioeconomically?
To clarify, are you seeing that now there's a trend more towards private, or?
I just felt like when I started as a first year in 2002, and when I graduated in 2006, it seemed like, yes, we're more people from the coasts, but also there's more wealth on the coasts. And it seemed like there was more private school educated people than there were in prior generations when my family had been at this university.
Let me, tell me if this doesn't answer your question. I think that our philosophy on aid, college aid, has changed tremendously over the last 5 years. A number of factors, right? The university, I think that there's greater attention on it from legislation. People are a little bit more aware of it. I think the university actually has made great strides to recognize that we're maybe a little harsh on our students in the past. Funny story. There are federal minimums for income threshold that there are federal limits for aid. Our limits were higher, so we held our families to a higher standard than were federally required. We've changed that. We also, just in our general aid award policies, we tended to do more of an all or nothing. So we tended to be a little bit more on the tails, if you will. We spent a great deal of time trying to level that out. So now, even if you're in that middle bracket, you see most families that are dual income that fall at a certain band. They make just enough to. Under our prior practice, they make just enough not to qualify, but sending their kids here would be a stretch. It would be a hardship. So we've smoothed that out. So now everyone gets something up to a certain point. Odyssey has helped tremendously. Odyssey continues to be fine-tuned. We leveled out the bands a little bit. No loans was 60, and it will be raised to 90. So I think that we, as an institution, it's not just admissions, it's an institutional commitment. We value diversity, and we see that for socioeconomic. 52% of our students do receive some sort of help.
And just to add a few numbers that sort of showed more on the student side, I mean, if you look at the financial aid given out to undergraduate students as a whole over the past few years, we've increased those every year, and we reached a high last year of $81.5 million compared to the few years beforehand. There's also did you mention QuestBridge, or you said Odyssey? QuestBridge is a private organization that some of the poorest students go through in order to get a really good financial aid package at some of the best schools in the country. The University of Chicago was one of the top schools to receive QuestBridge applicants and matriculants. So those students aren't feeling that the University of Chicago is a place that doesn't really welcome.
And do you feel like you're competitive with peer institutions in terms of those applicants who are the best and the brightest, but ultimately it comes down to how much aid do I get from another school that is accepting me. Do you feel like you're there and it's not a question of the amount of money you're able to give versus the amount of money Princeton or Harvard or whoever are able to give?
I think we're getting there. I mean,
we're in that middle bracket. My son's a second year. And Chicago, our older son was 4 years older. When he applied, the financial aid package was, it really would have been difficult. For this one now, it's very doable. And and as far as reaching out to kids from a more poor background, one of the kids we interviewed this year comes from a very small, tiny Christian college, like 26 kids in his class, very conservative, very poor family. And he qualified for the Questbridge scholarship. The school is so small that they finally had their first AP class his senior year. So he didn't really have access to the higher academics. But when we interviewed him, he just was so full of intellectual curiosity. And he just jumped on this AP class, and he was just raving about how much he loved being able to study at that level instead of his regular classes and such. He just wowed us so much, and he got it. And I think he'll do quite well here. So they are reaching out to those kids too, and they are getting it. Does it help?
Yeah, I'm happy they get in, but it's a question of they've received the acceptance. Now the big decision is, can I afford it, or does this other institution make it more?
Yeah, he did. He got to Questbridge,
And so I don't mean to be calling on, on behalf of another organization. Of course, a lot of this financial aid does come with endowments, and it also relies on some help as well. So
Princeton has more at its disposal than the university. So I think Princeton and Harvard, they have more flexibility than we do. But I think that with what we have, we're recognizing that there are areas of opportunity, and we're trying to address those.
Thank you.
For potential interviewers, do you provide training or orientation programs for?
Yeah.
I mean, yes, to an extent, we have.
So that we could answer questions like that, people ask.
I think we have a number of current chairs here. I think we have done more than we have in the past, but I think given the breadth of questions that we're starting to get, we need to look at more. Clearly, the A topic is coming up. When we send our volunteers to college fairs, I imagine that that's a hot topic.
Right.
And we direct A questions back to the office, but I think going forward, there's some things that we can do to get some information out.
And if some people here are more seasoned volunteers with the ASC, I mean, you're probably seeing the changes in questions over probably even the past 3 years. I mean, before it was, what is the University of Chicago? Now it's the specific questions about the University of Chicago itself. And so we're trying our best to increase the outreach and sort of teaching opportunities for our volunteers. We've always had an interview manual to sort of get our alumni through the process of getting prepared for an interview or meeting students at college fairs. Now we're actually trying to outreach more on our travel to alumni so that they can actually meet with an admissions officer, get in touch with the FAQs, and be a little bit more well-versed, knowledgeable, confident before they meet these students at college fairs and interviews. So.
I've sort of picked it up on the way. I mean, it's the financial aid is the area that I know least about in terms of the college, but I do get more and more questions about it. They give us a brochure on it. I usually just give them the brochure, say the answer's probably in here, and I eventually read the brochure and figure out something. Especially when someone asks me a question I can't answer, I try and research it, figure it out. But the other thing I do is someone in the admissions office can't answer the question if I can. That makes sense.
Right.
So
no, I was just thinking in an interview situation, you want to come across as being credible, and
you're an alumnus, you're not a member of the admissions committee, and you're not expected to know all this information.
Yeah, it's not knowing is a good answer actually.
It's not to a point where we might want to start to think about, whether or not we do WebExes at the beginning of every year, because I'd say in the past, up until 2 years ago, it was pretty much the responsibility of the local chairs to pick up the phone, give a manual, and have a conversation. But now, because we've gotten so big, and because there's questions like this that I probably could have answered, it may make sense to actually have 3 to 5 trainings a year via WebEx.
Right.
So, to your point about the question, I'm the Boston chair, to the point about the question about having really hard and fast facts,
ambassadorial relationship with these students where you are kind, you are informative, you have information, you know how to direct them to the resources, but there is just such a wide breadth and a variation in the kinds of questions that you ask. And someone might say, here's a very specific financial aid question. They often are tremendously specific. I've had someone come to an interview with their parents' tax returns and ask me to tell them what I thought. And I was like, that's really spectacular. Why did you come from the university? So anyway, I think there is more of kind of a move towards this kind of informational, it's almost an info session versus an interview. It should just be very candid conversation about where the university is and where we are. And I think you see that reflected too in the kinds of materials that we're giving out. So what we handed around, that is the material that's handed out at college fairs now. So that's the kind of quick overview here in Chicago, here's what we are. And I think we're doing a better job of giving a snapshot overview and selling ourselves in an elevator pitch almost versus trying to be the end-all be-all of knowledge, which is, I think, at one point what our interviewers are looking for from us until these points. The breadth of people that we're working with now is just so extreme that even when we have the capacity to offer that, it's just beyond our pale now. It's just a lot of work to get people up to the level of evaluation and information, but we are at a place where I think the information that we offer is helpful.
And to that point though, I mean, if we weren't sitting in the room hearing this review explain what the goal should be, right, there's very limited sort of or systemic approach to getting that message out. And so if we got to a point where Corin got to do a WebEx for everybody across the country, it actually may be helpful. And we'll explain that the process is you don't need to know all the facts, but you need to act in the following way to be an ambassador. And that might be a way to get that message out.
And like how to handle tricky questions and things like that.
Well, it's a pseudo admissions role, so it's
right. Interviewers to have a certain level of credibility, capability, knowledge, and so forth.
And not only interviewers, but of course we want all of our alumni to be a little bit more knowledgeable of the University of Chicago itself, because that increases their confidence for college fairs. I mean, the office is looking for help from our alumni itself. Sarah had mentioned that we can't send volunteers everywhere. Sometimes we can, and in I recruit in South Florida itself. I'm seeing 4 or 5 fairs a night. I can't hit all of those, and so we have 2 alumni here who had done a college fair this year, and really just making sure that they know about the University of Chicago, these WebExes, anything that we can do to outreach. You'll probably see a lot more of that coming from this office itself.
One final question?
I've done maybe 20 interviews. I've never had a challenge speaking to the students, a personal conversation where you're sharing your experiences in the spirit of the university and letting them ask questions about favorite experiences and challenges. And so I've never really run into the questions. A lot of the time they've over-prepared, very well for the interview, asking about certain clubs, certain degrees, certain programs. But they know they can get that information somewhere else. I think for the WebEx, I found a lot of the information about how to prepare for the interview very helpful. I think one of the things we might want to do is a follow-up where is the information I'm giving to the admissions group helpful? I'm writing these reports on what I think about the students and our conversations, which have all been really terrific, but then I don't know if the information, the type I'm providing or what I'm talking about is actually helpful, and I'd hate to think that I'm wasting the students' time and my time if it's something that's not going to help the process.
No, that's something, so I've been in this role about a year, and that's something I heard a lot of when we came in. We made some slight changes, I think, last year, but I think that there's still, to address your point, there's still some things that we can do differently. All right. I enjoyed the conversation and the variety of questions. I think it really gives us a chance to see kind of what the pulse is and really hear that admissions is something that people are interested in. We do value support, and if there is a chance that you would like to sign up for the ASC, we encourage you to do so. We can take your name and number and put you in contact with the regional chair. So thank you all for your time.
Enjoy the day.